the first full day of autumn here in the upper Midwest. There's a chill in the air and the nighttime temperatures are dipping down into the mid to upper 30s. For some people, this might signal the end of the gardening season, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are a lot of exciting things still happening, especially in the perennial border. We're here today in the garden of Marge Holes. She's a garden writer, a garden designer, lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. And she's going to walk us through her garden, show some of the things that she's done, some of the things she's planted that help to extend the season in her garden. Hi, Marge.
Hi, Lynn. Welcome to my garden.
Thank you. Nice to see you as always. Well, your garden is looking beautiful as usual, but this could be June in your garden. Look at all the things still blooming and things still happening. I especially like this section right here where you've got the gray foliage plants.
I wanted to set off the roses with gray foliage, and so I have a big patch of lamb's ears in here, which is getting bigger all the time because they march, of course. And this is lavender hid coat, which I grow from seed every year. This one made it through last winter because we didn't have a particularly cold winter, but some years it won't make it in the zone.
It's kind of a borderline here in zone 4,
sort of 4 or 5, right. And this is licorice plant, which is part of an annual coming out of that pot. That's not a Minnesota hardy.
Very nice together. And it does set off the rose. And look at this rose, still blooming its heart out here, end of September.
Well, this is Carefree Delight, and it's been doing that all summer. It gets the biggest flush in June, but it keeps going all summer long. And it's sort of basically a low rose, but then it sends out these arching shoots, and they were really way out to here the other day. I just cut them back a little bit. So it's quite a rangy rose, but it's a wonderful bloomer, and the foliage has held up with no disease at all.
Looks great. Do you have to do anything special to get your roses to bloom in September like this?
No, I think it's just a rose that's a repeater, or actually almost a continuous bloomer in this case. I give them 10-10-10 fertilizer in the spring. And if I get around to it, I give them fertilizer again, but I don't think I did this summer. I
see up here we have 2 of the more typical fall blooming plants, things that people do think of for fall. Is this a little aster here, Marge?
That's Purple Dome, which is a cultivar of the New England aster. That's as high as it ever gets. It won't get any bigger than that, about 18-24 inches. Blooms wonderfully.
That's nice. Most asters get a little bit out of hand by this time of year.
Well, actually, there are a lot of new cultivars that are much shorter in the market now that are hardy in Minnesota.
Good, that's nice. And then next to it, we have the very popular Sedum Autumn Joy.
Right. Which has gotten bigger than usual this year and is flopping a little bit. I think it's getting hit by the sprinkler system.
I really like the 2 plants together. That's a very nice combination.
As we go around the garden, you'll notice I almost always put asters next to sedum because I think they work well together.
Right. And over here we have a nice low-growing ground cover. Now, most ground covers wouldn't be fall bloomers either, but you've managed to find one that's adding a lot of interest at this time of year.
Well, this is a dwarf fleece flower, and it blooms like that all summer long, and it sort of creeps along. I just put a few plants in last year, and it's making a very nice ground cover in this area. The sprinkler system is under here, the big box for it, and I was trying to get something that would creep over it so it wouldn't show.
Most ground covers usually are planted for some purpose, and it's always interesting to find out why people chose to plant what they did. Well, here we are with a low-to-the-ground plant, but I see over in that section of the garden you've got something interesting growing up the wall. So tell me about these 2 beautiful vines, Marge.
Well, this is Clematis vitacella, which is a little species clematis that blooms mainly in June, but has some bloom that follows all the way through to fall. There's always parts of it blooming. And I have it here because I need some height on this side of the garden, and it covers the bareness of the wall of the garage.
It's very nice, very nice. And this one?
That's Sweet Autumn Clematis, which is a fall bloomer. It doesn't start blooming until September, late August, and then it blooms through, well, until it gets killed.
Smells nice.
Yeah, it's wonderful, very, very fragrant.
Now, this plant isn't technically a perennial, but I think we should just talk about it a little bit because it's such a popular fall bloomer.
Well, that's Annabelle hydrangea, which is the hardiest hydrangea for this climate. And I love it. I put it in almost every garden that I do. It starts out with sort of chartreuse balls, and then they get creamy, and then they almost go back to chartreuse, and then you can leave it on all winter for winter interest in the garden.
Yes, very,
or
very nice.
Cut for the house too.
Right, a lot of people use them indoors.
Yeah.
And I see here we've got another bright cherry aster, although this isn't the typical purple color.
Well, this is Alma Potchki, which is a New England aster cultivar that I just put in this year, and it's done quite well for its first year in the garden, I think.
Very well, I'd say, very well.
This is a tough spot. I've tried several other things here that haven't done well, but the aster seems to like it. It's part shade, and the soil's a little bit wet in this spot, but this one's doing just fine.
Marge, one of the things that I really admire about your garden is how you've managed to have a lot of pinks, purples, whites, the cooler colors in the fall garden, because typically we would think of the hotter colors, the oranges, the reds, the yellows, and this is very nice and very refreshing to see these colors in the fall garden.
Well, there really are not too many fall plants that bloom in pinks and purples, but there are enough so that you can do this if that's what you want to do. I used to have a lot of black-eyed Susans and things in the garden, and I've slowly taken them out because I find that I enjoy the softer colors more. This is Vivid Obedient plant. That one blooms in August and September. I usually cut it back, so it's probably blooming a little later than it might. It's just one of those plants that I shear off at about halfway. When it gets to 2 feet, I take it back to 1.
Okay.
And that makes it bushier and less floppy.
There's a lot of fall blooming plants that really benefit from that shearing back before they start to set their flower buds, and so you get a fuller plant, and then it reduces the need for so much staking and such in the fall.
Also, you can cut for reblooming. The little salvia that's down in front there, I cut that all the way back almost to the ground, and now it's reblooming.
Okay. So another way to get fall bloom is to encourage your plants to bloom again.
Exactly.
Not
and
just
some
for
will,
the first.
Not all plants will do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just tell me about this rose.
Well, that's Lavender Dream, and that is my favorite rose. I think it probably has some Pollyanna background in it, and I first saw it at the Chicago Botanical Garden and then went looking for it here. And I found it to be fully hardy in Minnesota. It's its third year.
It's very beautiful. Now, we must touch on chrysanthemums because they are the epitome of fall garden plants. And I know you've got some in a garden back there. Can we go take a look?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. What is this one, Marge?
This is Centerpiece. It's one of the ones developed by the University of Minnesota. Most of them are developed to start blooming at the beginning of September. Otherwise, it can get so late that they get killed before they bloom with some of the ones that would be available elsewhere in the country.
Right. Now, do you pinch your chrysanthemums?
Yes, I pinch them until July 4th. I pinch them probably 3 times to get them nice and bushy.
Okay.
I would probably, if this weren't already budded, I would just pinch right above a node where a little leaf is coming out, reasonably near the top of the plant. Of course, once it's budded, you wouldn't be doing it anymore.
Good. And what is this plant that's poking up through that's growing behind?
Oh, this is my buddleia bush. You're not supposed to be able to grow that here, but it's kind of fun to try. And this is
like you're doing fine.
Well, this is violet butterfly, and I got the seeds, I think, in the Stokes catalog about 3 years ago. And it's been killed to the ground each year. This is all this year's growth, and I'm hoping I can keep it going.
And I see a few more chrysanthemums back there.
Right. They've been there for a number of years. They seem to be hardy. You know, once in a while we lose our mums here too in a bad winter, but these have been here for a few years, and they're doing well.
Depends on where they're growing, it seems, whether or not they'll make it through the winter.
I think this could be a microclimate here. It's south exposure.
Yes. And tell me about this plant.
This is Monarda astromontana, which I get seeds from the Thompson & Morgan catalog. I've never seen it for sale in a nursery, but it's a wonderful plant. It blooms all summer long. Right now it's about finished, but it's lavender and it's spiky, and it provides some vertical interest in the garden when other plants are low and mounded near it.
Okay. And here we've got some color coming from annuals.
Right. That's the little lemon gem marigold.
Okay. And what's this being so aggressive here through the cracks?
Coreopsis rosea.
Okay.
Less known than the moonbeam that everybody area has, the yellow one.
Okay.
But this is a lower growing, bushy little plant. Seems to like it in the sun.
And a lot of color still here in the fall.
It's a little bit invasive. I mean, I've had to pull it out over here a little bit too.
Okay. Another mum here.
This is Bonnie Blush, I think.
Okay.
I was looking at my notes trying to figure it out. It also one developed in the university's program to bloom earlier. It's supposed to start about the 5th of September.
Okay. Looks very nice. Interesting colors. And tell me about this plant up here, because this has a lot of bloom left yet.
Well, that's a native aster called heath aster that I harvested some from a wild garden that I did a few years ago and grew from seed.
Okay.
You can see it flops badly. It has to be staked, and even then it isn't too easy to do it. So it's sort of semi-satisfactory. I think it's going at the end of the year.
Okay, very delicate little white flowers, yes. All right, now we haven't even touched on that beautiful front yard garden, so I need you to show me some of those things up front. Now we've got a lot of things still blooming in this garden. A little bit left on this Japanese anemone. That's very nice.
That's a wonderful plant. The foliage is good all summer long. You get a big drift of it, and then it starts to bloom in August. And it's just finishing now, but I think the seed heads are pretty too.
Very nice fall bloomer. And here we have the typical New England aster. Very important for the fall garden, I'd say.
Right. It just is the centerpiece of my fall garden.
Yes. Now, did you cut this back in the spring?
Yes, I did. We've had a longer growing season than usual, or it wouldn't be quite this tall, but it makes it bush out a lot more if you cut it back. And when it gets to about 2 feet, I cut it back to about 1.
About halfway, right. And while we're talking about cutting back, are you going to be cutting back your perennials in the fall? Do you do that to the fall garden?
I do. For something like this, I would cut back in the fall because it seeds itself so much. This is the native New England aster. But also because I don't have time in the spring. I try to clean up my garden in the fall. And certainly, as a master gardener, I do as I'm told, and we're told to do it in the fall. Because getting rid of all that debris takes away diseases, too, that might fester in the garden over winter.
Now, I know the argument is also made for leaving a lot of perennials through the winter, offer winter interest. Some of them, the seed heads, the birds enjoy coming and feasting on the seed heads. So I think it's just a little common sense. This is a charming plant. Tell me about this, Marge.
Well, that's Verbena bonariensis, or Brazilian verbena.
Okay.
And I planted some over here, but this has seeded itself here from last year.
Okay. And that's an annual.
Yes,
correct?
In our climate it is. Yeah.
And last but not least, I see the goldenrod, another popular fall bloomer.
Right. This came in as piggyback on the asters when a friend gave them to me. It's aggressive.
Many people wouldn't think of it as a garden plant, and a lot of people still mistakenly believe it to be the cause of hay fever, which we know isn't true, and it is a good garden plant, but it does suffer from kind of a bad reputation.
Well, given it the 1 inch of space it has to grow in it can't be too invasive here. You know, there are small cultivars of this plant now, there's one called Golden Fleece that are only about 18 inches high that are very nice for the front of the garden.
Probably much better selections, that's right. Well, thank you so much. This has been just lovely. I've always enjoyed visiting your garden, but I've never been here in the fall, and this is very nice.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks for sharing it.